Yes, 6.1. Validate my lore videos like the good little patch that you are. Greetings, everyone. I hope everybody got a good taste of what patch 6.1 had to offer yesterday and was able to enjoy all the new story hooks that we got. Cause yeah, we got more than a few. If you've not finished the 6.1 patch story, I'd recommend doing so and then coming back here so we can begin our discussion in earnest. Don't worry, I'll be patient. But if you've already finished the story, then let's address the various elephants in the room. We'll start with the reappearance of the Void Scent that Xenos was seen using throughout Endwalker. Stating that it had at last returned suggests that its essence has been riding the cosmic waves from the edge of reality all the way back to our star. Much like how Medion was able to gather souls from across the universe, it's not beyond the realm of possibility for an entity to travel a similar way given it knows where to go. And since all Void Scent have an almost constant pull toward the void, it likely acted like a dark lighthouse for this thing. What are its plans now that its master is dead and is free to roam the void once more? I've no clue. But the Warrior of Light will definitely be in for a surprise when they see the partner of their greatest frenemy wandering around the void. Assuming we get to travel to the void soon. Which we likely are if there aren't any sudden side quests in patch 6.2. But now we get into the meat and potatoes of patch 6.1. The Void, otherwise known as the 13th. Those of you that watched my lore videos on the Void Scent a while back were likely happy to have already known how planar fissures and void gates worked to an extent. I for one found them addressing old lore to be refreshing, especially that of the Atamos. The pre-Calamity events involving the Atamos were actually a mechanic within 1.0. She wasn't just pulling a random story out of nowhere. This was back when you had to spend a unique currency to teleport around the world, and sometimes an Atamos would be next to an Aetheryte crystal and this would mess with it. Yeah, 1.0 limited how often you could teleport with a daily currency, and I did not care for it. But I digress. The Atamos of history were indeed a thing in 1.0, so that cheeky reference was nice. But onto the Void itself and the entities there within. Any fans of Final Fantasy IV were likely taken aback when they saw this armor-clad knight step out of the shadows. It turns out that Endwalker still has more Final Fantasy IV references up its sleeve. This, ladies and gentlemen, is none other than the recurring antagonist of Final Fantasy IV, Golbez. I can't tell you how great it felt recognizing him via those massive pauldrons. It's amazing how a Final Fantasy villain can rock shoulders that big and still make it work. For those who doubt my words, note that in Final Fantasy IV, Golbez was often referred to as the Man in Black. In patch 6.1, he reprised this role as the Knight in Black. And if there are still any naysayers in the audience that doubt this is a Golbez reference, I present Exhibit A, Exhibit B, and Exhibit C. Oh, hold on. We'll get to that juicy bit of lore in a moment. First, we need to address the entities that Golbez was speaking with. As you all likely noticed, there were 4 elemental thrones that spoke with Golbez during this cutscene. If we hold on to our Final Fantasy IV references, then we already know who these 4 entities are. The Blighted Despot, Scarmiglion, representing the Throne of Earth. The Autarch of Flame, Rubicante, representing the Throne of Fire. The Empress of Winds, Barbaricia, representing the Wind Throne. And lastly, we have the Drowned King, Cagnazo, representing the Water Throne. Within Final Fantasy IV, these entities were known as the Elemental Archfiends, monsters of extraordinary power that acted as generals within a dark army that was under the command of Golbez himself. These creatures lied, cheated, deceived, and slaughtered many people within the story of Final Fantasy IV just to forward their own agendas. And I have no reason to believe that the creatures that have been inspired by them would act any differently. So why are they here? And what purpose could they serve in the future? Well, to that end, we need not look much further than the Void Scent's lore and the video I made discussing them a while back. There are a total of 12 rungs that establish the Void Sense hierarchy, with creatures like imps being on the 12th rung, and therefore the lowest. But then you have entities like the Cloud of Darkness, or Skahak, being in the 1st rung, because of how unbelievably powerful they are. With that brief explanation out of the way, we can assume that our quick journey through the World of Darkness during the Crystal Tower raid may have shaken up the hierarchy a bit. By defeating major players, the power and authority of their system was brought into question, possibly causing infighting between the Void Sense since they're always gunning for greater power. You need not look for a greater example than what Diablos was attempting during the raids involving Mach and Heavensward. If this version of Golbez is indeed a powerful Void Sense in Final Fantasy XIV, then he likely occupies the 1st rung, and is aiming for a particular plan to see to fruition. As we saw with the Cloud of Darkness, once you're the strongest Void Sense, all you have time for are schemes. His 4 elemental Archfiends are likely Void Sense within the upper rungs as well, placing them at the same power levels as creatures like Diablos or Echidna, who even in their weakened state, could still command devastating power. This asserts that fighting them on their home turf would likely be suicidal for anyone that wasn't prepared. Lastly, we'll go over the thing I let slip earlier in the video, and that's likely the ultimate fate of the dragon Azdaia. As we're told, Azdaia dove into the void to try and slay their leaders before they had a chance to enter the source. This was ultimately a foolish attempt given the nature of how the void works, but an honorable sacrifice nonetheless. But the thing we need to pull from this discovery is yet another reference to Golbez himself. Within Final Fantasy IV, Golbez had a sort of summon spirit. This summoned entity manifested itself in the form of a shadow dragon. This dragon was under his complete control and would attack the party with ruthless efficiency. If we follow this obvious trail of breadcrumbs, we come to the conclusion that Azdaia has likely succumbed to the influence of the Void, and has become the thrall of Final Fantasy XIV's version of Golbez. In all likelihood, we'll have to do battle with her at some point. Whether or not she can be saved is a question I don't have the answer to. Dragon physiology is unique, and what normally would be impossible for the mortal races is feasible by the Dragonkin's standards. Mayhaps Azdaia can be ripped from the Void's control, and be spared from having to serve the very forces she seeks to destroy. But even if such a thing does occur, Azdaia has been in the Void for thousands of years, and as such, I doubt she'll ever be able to go back to her former self entirely. But who knows? It wouldn't be the first time we witnessed a miracle in this story. Even so, that will be enough of me picking at the major plot hooks of patch 6.1 for now. I'm still exploring other aspects of the story from the patch, and I'm debating on whether or not to make a follow-up to my 12 Gods video with what we learned in the new raid. If that'd be interesting to you, then let me know, and I'll get to work on that. In the meantime, I'll continue creating all sorts of juicy Final Fantasy XIV lore videos for you all to enjoy. So until next we meet, stay safe, my friends.